Fresh meat.
Space. According to some, it's the final frontier. But in 1997, Paul W.S. Anderson unleashed a horror film that showed that things outside of Earth's atmosphere might be better left to the unknown. Event Horizon revealed that hell was a very real place and could be accessed by mankind. But the question is, should it be? After production issues, injuries, lost footage, Anderson himself found that he had entered his own nightmare. So let's dig into and find out what happened to Event Horizon on our latest episode of What the F*** Happened to this horror movie. After Anderson released the video game adaptation Mortal Kombat to box office success, scripts began to flood into his office. Even New Line had hoped he would direct the sequel, Annihilation. Hell, he was even offered the job of directing the very first X-Men movie. But what he really wanted to do was move away from the PG-13 style film and do a solid R-rated horror film. And one person that helped him achieve this was James Cameron. Well, sort of. The production delays and ballooning budget of Titanic were big news in the film world. Paramount had to move the film off of its summer 1997 schedule, which left a big hole in the release calendar. And rather than leave that date open, they decided to fill it with a film they thought could bring in a decent audience in the always full summer season. They looked to a script they had purchased from Philip Eisner, which was labeled as a haunted house movie in space, and then sent it over to Anderson. He liked the idea, but wanted drastic rewrites. The original story was about a cruise ship that entered a warped gateway and ended up infested with tentacled aliens on board the ship. You see, Anderson wanted to take the story away from the typical alien stowaways and come up with a truly haunted spaceship and gateways to hell. Paramount approved and greenlit the film, but with one catch. They had only 10 months to shoot and edit the film, and for such an effects-heavy production, this was a very short window. With a release date firmly locked in place, the cast and crew moved forward to get their film finished against a ticking clock. In the film, the rescue crew of the ship Lewis and Clark are tasked with checking on a distress beacon from another ship named Event Horizon. The thing is that Event Horizon disappeared 7 years earlier while on an experimental mission to test a new gravity drive. With this new engine, the ship could create a black hole to bridge two different places and help a ship travel large distances instantaneously. But after the initial test, the ship disappeared, only to reappear in the orbit around Neptune. Along for the trip is Dr. Weir, played by Sam Neill, who designed the ship and is eager to reclaim it. Now, after boarding the Event Horizon, it is apparent something terrible has happened. Things are a mess, and a body is quickly found floating in the ship's zero gravity. A quick search of the ship's logs finds a scrambled message that, when decrypted, shows that after the ship entered the black hole, it descended into a hellscape that none of the crew were able to escape. They seemed to go mad and began attacking each other while mutilating themselves. As set issues arose, things just got harder. Actress Jolie Richardson has gone on the record that making the film almost seemed cursed. She described a scene where Sam Neill and herself were at a console typing away, and then a fake explosion would go off and knock them out of their chairs. When they would be doing the scene, they would be ready and prepared for the fake explosion to go off, and then they would wake up on the floor with no memories of how they got there. And this apparently happened a few times. Then the rotating quarter became a problem. This would cause issues with the camera operators. They would start to lose orientation and the camera would then start to move. Eventually they had to rely on a locked-down camera to capture the scene, only to then have the same problem happen to Lawrence Fishburne. After running a few feet, he would also lose his place and begin to get vertigo, and the shots you see in the movie had to be assembled using short takes. During an explosion on the same set, a small fire started which caused a lot of damage.
And the flames went onto the silk cloth that was wrapped into the set, and the whole thing just went up literally in about a minute.
All of this on an already limited shooting schedule tightened the already tense production. And then the one thing you would think would be no problem at all, the cast were required to wear large spacesuits during part of the shoot. The issue was that these suits weighed about 65 pounds, and the way they were constructed prevented the actors from being able to sit down. If the actors tried to stand for too long while wearing these suits, it started causing terrible back pain, obviously an issue that wasn't thought of when the suits were created. Special poles had to be constructed to the suits so the actors could relax their bodies without having to worry about carrying the weight the entire time. But besides all of the problems, Anderson was able to finish the film on time. After filming it wrapped, Anderson only had a scant 4 weeks to edit the whole thing together so it could be tested in front of an audience. Now, editing had already started happening while the film was still being shot. When the first cut was delivered, it came in at 130 minutes. Of course, Anderson knew it needed further editing, but decided to see how the test screening went before jumping back into the cutting room. Why cut if you don't have to? Anderson described the screening as disastrous.
A main part of our problem with the film was that we had such a compacted post-production schedule that we were testing the movie way too early. We were putting it in front of an audience before we really had a chance to refine the cut.
Many of the visual effects were not completed. Even more was the fact that the Paramount execs had yet to watch the dailies of the fabled blood orgy scenes. Now, this was the extended look at the footage of what happened to the original crew of the Event Horizon. What ended up in the finished film was about 15 seconds. Originally, much more was present, and the gore and hyper-sexual content was on full display. Anderson shot this footage on weekends with a reduced crew, and he thinks that Paramount perhaps thought this would be insert shots of people pushing buttons, close-ups of hands grabbing equipment, or, other boring content. Instead, they saw footage of the crew members sticking fingers deep into each other's eyes, a shot of a female crew member sodomizing a male with an iron pipe. There's also just a lot more shots of the Event Horizon crew naked and covered in blood, having violent sex and eating each other. Stuff for the family. There's a more graphic version of the scene where a man pulls out his intestines through his mouth. One crew member is even held down and stabbed in the back of the head with a spike. There's even a scene where a woman has screws drilled into her teeth. Ugh.
I mean, it really...
People were very distressed.
People were really, really upset by it, even by the level of unpleasantness there is in it now. I mean, you can just imagine the kind of response to the really hardcore version that we had originally.
Anderson, being the pro that he is, realized what he had to do to make this scene seem more realistic. And the reason the scene disturbed the test audience was that the filmmakers hired real-life amputees for the special effects scenes, where the Event Horizon crew members had their body parts damaged or ripped off, and porn actors were hired to make the sex scenes more graphic. Basically how you do it right. Now, there are claims, legend of sorts, that the gore throughout this entire 130-minute cut actually made people recoil in horror and even faint at the test screening. Well, Anderson knew it had to be edited down already. Paramount said that they wanted the length and gore scaled back dramatically. So he went back into the editing room and cut it down to a scant 90 minutes, which took out a lot of the gore and a few story beats that in retrospect were more important than he originally thought. In the now cutscenes, there was more of a friendship between Cooper and Justin. The crew faces their biggest fears, and with this cut footage, it's shown that Cooper's biggest fear is that something will happen to someone close to him. This also led to more scenes that explain what the Black Gateway actually was, fleshing out the ship a bit more. I mean, there's also some stellar shots of Miller stumbling upon DJ, flayed open on the operating table, which of course was shortened. Peter's flashback to her son's legs covered in maggots was also longer in the original cut. Now, these effects were deemed too gruesome, as it looked realistic, and this effect on a child character disturbed many audiences at the screening. Now, what could have been a standout scene that included Sam Neill's Weir also ended up on the cutting room floor. While the lieutenant prepares the gravity tanks, one of them starts to fill with blood, and as blood flows onto the ship, a now skinless Weir emerges. As Stark runs to escape and falls down the ladder, Weir proceeds to crawl down the ladder upside down after her, in what seems to be almost a nod to the spider walk from The Exorcist. Now, while Anderson wasn't happy with the new 90-minute cut, he had run out of time. And Paramount, being, money happy as they were, was happy enough. It would have been delivered and was ready to ship it out in a few days' time. When the film hit theaters, it seemed to falter at the box office, and it ended up making only $42 million against a $60 million budget. But there was one person who saw the potential in Event Horizon. After showing the film to his friend Kurt Russell, he said, "Forget about what the movie's doing now. In 15 years' time, this is going to be the movie you're glad you made."
Have you paid your dues, Jack? Yes, sir, the check is in the mail.
Event Horizon was a moderate success on home video, but what really grabbed Paramount's attention was its initial release on DVD. It seems during its time on the video rental shelves, its audience had finally been found. The DVD sales were far above what everyone thought they would be. And because of this, Paramount approached Anderson about putting back together a director's cut of the film. He accepted and was happy that a true version of what he wanted his film to be would finally be available. But my friend, this story does not have a happy ending. When they went to retrieve the cut, the footage was unable to be found. Anderson himself went on to scour vaults worldwide, but it appears that the cut footage was possibly destroyed or stored incorrectly. No viable copy of the footage has been found to this day. Hell, even Scream Factory had announced a collector's edition Blu-ray of the film, and even asked for help locating any remaining lost footage. The release date was pushed back multiple times as they explored different leads, but in the end, nothing was found. If anything, it is proved that in space, everyone can actually hear you scream. Hey, thanks for watching our show. If you like what you see, please subscribe to our JoBlo Horror Videos channel. Tell your friends you like this sort of content. And turn on the bell, you know the one, to receive notifications for all of our latest videos. You know, we're an independent company, and we appreciate all of your support.
I went to a wake on the soaked streets of Blue Island. And my father, though a strong man, you know, I swear I saw him crying. Another generation gone has ceased south side end. When you say a prayer and you put him in the ground, you speak of whiskey and it's mark 'em bound. Ain't no new shit going down at the soaked streets of Blue Island.